What's up, Planeswalkers? It's your boy K-Dog. This one we'll be taking a look at the historic Brawl list for the FNM event. And this one we're looking at Vraska, Golgari Queen, the 4-mana Vraska. Of course, removal, card advantage, and an ultimate that can be game-winning. So yeah, just a sweet all-around card. The nice thing about Vraska is that, at 4 mana, she's on the kind of cheaper end as far as commanders go, because you're likely going to be casting your commander multiple times, so you generally want to be in that kind of 3-4 mana range for your commanders. And really though, I chose Golgari because of wanting to run like an Undergrowth and Reanimator type theme, and so Vraska is just kind of a nice utility spell that kind of complements that strategy pretty well. So Vraska is just kind of there just to give us an excuse to run this sort of reanimation strategy in Golgari colors. And so we do have some pretty nice payoffs at the end. Let's just start at the beginning, shall we? Knight of the Ebon Legion, just a fantastic card, of course. It's good in the early game, good in the late game. We do have a lot of spells that kind of supplement this sort of Undergrowth reanimation strategy, and so we try to fit in as many creatures that can be payoffs as we can, and Knight of the Ebon Legion at 1 mana is just kind of a nice way to do that, as you can just play it in the early game. It's something you can reanimate later on, just have a super powerful knight here, because you have all the mana to activate the ability multiple times and that kind of thing, because obviously Brawl and Commander type games can go on for some time. Also, looking at Stitcher Supplier, it's a 1-mana 1/1. When it enters or dies, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. So we are trying to fill up our own graveyard with creatures and then get some payoffs with them later on. And so Stitcher Supplier allows us to do that multiple times. So just, yeah, fits in perfectly with what we're trying to do here. Mire Triton, kind of the same thing. It's a 2/1 with Death Touch. When it enters, top 2 cards go to your library and you gain 2 life. So just a perfect all-around card. Order of Midnight is a 2/2 flyer for 2 mana, and also lets us get a creature back from our graveyard to our hand. So if we mill something from all these self-mill spells, and we need to get something back, like a Chupacabra, or we need to bring back some more self-mill, Order of Midnight lets us do that. Also lets us get back any of our bigger payoffs later on. So just kind of a nice way to little bit of protection, so if we do mill something we didn't necessarily want to mill, we can kind of get it back to our hand and just cast it. Crawl Harpooner, 3/2 with reach. When it enters, we can fight a flying creature on our opponent's side, and it gets S plus X plus 0, where X equals the number of creature cards in our graveyard. So obviously we can get pretty big and take out pretty much any flyer on our opponent's side. It does fight, so we could lose the Harpooner, but this reanimation type shell, we're not really too worried about that. So either way, it's just an aggressive 3/2 body on turn 2, or it could just be a way to remove flyers on our opponent's side, potentially even multiple times. Also, we're looking at Binding of Titans as a way to kind of fill up our graveyard as well as our opponents, which can be relevant with some of our reanimation spells. We also get to exile cards from our opponent's graveyard, and if we exile creatures, we gain 1 life. So it kind of depends on what do we mill. If something with escape, we're probably going to be targeting it. If it's a creature that we want to get back, we're probably going to be leaving it in there. So pretty much anything with like a jump start or things like that are going to be great targets for this. Also running Glowspore Shaman, of course. It's 3/1 that mills 3 cards into our graveyard, and also gives us a little bit of fixing, as we can put land back from our graveyard to top of our library. Embodiment of Agonies. It's a 3-mana flying Death Touch demon. Enters the battlefield with +1/+1 encounter on it for each different mana cost among non-land cards in our graveyards. And so it specifically spells out that it's not referring to 3 total converted mana cost. If something is 2 and black, or something is 1 black black, even though it's 3 total, they count as 2 different mana costs for the purposes of this card. And since we're in a singleton format, we're going to have a ton of different mana costs, and so this thing can get quite big. And it's flying and Death Touch, so this can potentially win you the game in certain situations, or just a Death Touch to obviously block your opponent's stuff. Gorging Vulture, another way to fill our own graveyard. 2/2 flyer, we mill 4 cards, and also gives us a little bit of life gain for each creature milled that way. Isareth the Awakener. Just kind of a fun little forgotten card here from core set 19. It's a 3/3 Death Touch for 3, so that's pretty decent. And when it attacks, we pay X and return a creature card with mana cost X from our graveyard to the battlefield. And then, of course, if that creature does leave the battlefield, it just goes to exile, so it's not like you can just keep reanimating it. However, this is a nice, fantastic ability here. Just Death Touch on a creature, of course, is always nice, and then being able to get something back, even if your opponent blocks it and you lose your Isareth, you at least kill whatever they're blocking with, and you get something back. Midnight Reaper, just a fantastic source of card draw. Murderous Rider, just removal for creatures or planeswalkers. Loaming Shaman, when it enters, target player shuffles any number of target cards from their graveyard into their library. And it's a 3/2 for 3, so it's decent enough. This is mostly here for for the non-permanent spells. So if we do mill something, any of our instants or sorceries that we need to get back, Loaming Shaman lets us shuffle those back into our library, and so we have a chance to draw them a little bit later on. Leyline Prowler, just a nice creature here, 3 mana, 2/3, Death Touch, Lifelink, and lets us tap for 1 mana of any color, so kind of a little bit of ramp, so we can kind of ramp into our bigger plays a little bit sooner. And also with the Death Touch, kind of keeps your opponent at bay, and also the Lifelink, of course, can be pretty nice. And since we are leaning pretty hard towards black, we're running Erebos. It's a 5/6 indestructible. If your devotion is less than 5, it's not a creature, but since we are having a lot of obviously double black spells here, we should be able to get devotion pretty easily. And then, of course, it's card advantage. When our creatures die, we can pay 2 life to draw a card, and we do have a little bit of life gain as well, so we should be able to at least get some card advantage off of this. And it could potentially even be removal, as we can sack a creature and give another target creature -2/-1 until end of turn. And of course, Ravenous Chupacabra is kind of like an auto-include for any blacklist to destroy any creature on our opponent's side. Venomous Hierophant, it's a 3/3 for 4, however it has Death Touch, and we mill 3 cards into our graveyard. And here's one of our payoffs here, Golgari Raiders. It's a 4 mana Elf Warrior with haste, and enters with a +1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. So we are pretty heavy on creatures. We have 26, I believe, in total. Yep, 26 total creatures. And you can see how much milling we're doing with Venomous Hierophant, Glowspore Shaman, Mire Triton, and things like that. So Golgari Raiders can obviously get pretty big, can be like a 10-10, 12-12, and with haste, so you can kind of catch your opponent completely off guard. And this is obviously fantastic after a board clear, because then your opponent just fills up your graveyard even more, and then hopefully they're tapped out or they don't have any instant speed interaction for this, and you can just swing in for like 12 damage out of nowhere, potentially even end the game that way. So yeah, just a fun little card, fits in perfectly with our strategy, and with all the reanimation, you can even potentially play this multiple times. Acolyte of Affliction is another way for us to fill up our graveyard, as the top 2 cards go to our graveyard. We also get to choose any permanents and put those back into our hand. Golgari Finebroker, kind of the same thing, but it's a 3/4, so a little bit bigger body. And it does not mill though, but we still get to return a permanent to our hand. So any creatures or planeswalkers we need to get back, it's nice to have that option. And Storev also fills that same role. It's a 5/4 for 4 with Trample. And as long as it deals damage to a player or even a planeswalker, we get to return a creature or planeswalker from our graveyard to your hand that was not put there this combat. So a little awkward, so we couldn't have milled it that turn, but we have so much self-milling, there's still going to be plenty of targets for us to potentially get something back, whatever is relevant. And just a 5/4 Trample for 4 is a pretty sweet creature right there. And here we go for our Reanimation Spells. Bond to Revival, 5 mana sorcery. We turn a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains haste. This is fantastic for any of our kind of bigger creatures that we're about to get to. And of course, we do have some other creatures like Erebos, even something like Isareth that can be pretty sweet to reanimate. Even like Storev, of course. So yeah, we have some nice juicy targets, and a couple that we're about to get to as well. Cauldron's Gift is kind of the same thing. However, if you spend 3 black mana as part of its 5 mana casting cost, You put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard, so more creature options to reanimate, and then we can choose any creature card in our graveyard and return it to the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So it comes back even bigger and better than it was before. And of course, Cavalier of Night. When it enters, we can destroy a creature on our opponent's side. When it dies, we get one of our creatures back. So it fits in exactly with what we're trying to do here. Rise from the Grave. It's a 5-mana sorcery. We can put a creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. And for what it's worth, it's a zombie in addition to its other colors and types. So this lets us get stuff from out of our opponent's graveyard. Obviously, we have the Death Touch creatures. So it's a fantastic way to kind of get back anything that we want on our opponent's side. Underworld Sentinel. Haven't really played around with this too much, but definitely want to give it a try. I think this could work really well in this list. It's a 4/5 for 5, so it's okay. However, when it attacks, we exile a creature card from our graveyard, and then when this dies, all cards that we exiled with it go onto the battlefield. So that's super powerful. If we can exile even like 2 things with this, and then our opponent's not going to necessarily want to block into us, because if we just throw the Underworld Sentinel into it, knowing that it's going to die, then we just get 2 super powerful creatures back. So it's a pretty interesting little card. Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. It's a legendary sorcery at 5 mana. We first put a creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control, so we can choose our opponent's graveyard, and we also target planeswalkers with this, so that's pretty sweet. Then we get to destroy 1 target creature or planeswalker, but then we have to exile the Vile Offering. So legendary sorcery means that we have to have a legendary creature or planeswalker on the battlefield. So obviously we do have the Vraska as our commander, and we also have Vraska 6 as our planeswalker removal spell and card advantage. And we also have Storev is legendary, and of course Erebos is legendary. So we do have enough ways to enable Yawgmoth's Vile Offering, and also being able to dig into our opponent's graveyard for creatures or planeswalkers. It's just a really fun spell. And of course we're also running Liliana, Dreadhorde General, 6 mana, planeswalker. Whenever a creature dies, we draw a card, one of our creatures of course. We can +1 to make zombie tokens, and we can -4 to make each player sacrifice 2 creatures. And -9 is pretty much just going to win you the game. Obviously with our reanimation strategy, we don't mind sacrificing. We just want to keep our opponent from being able to do good stuff, and Liliana helps us do that. And she's got her big old zombie army. So yeah, it's a nice flavor win as well with our reanimation. And then Izonia is kind of another payoff for having a bunch of creatures in our graveyard. It's a 2/3 for 6, so it's not really great. However, when it enters, we get a 1/1 insect for each creature card in our graveyard. And we can just pay black and green, you sack another creature to gain a life and draw a card. So it's a nice way to kind of go wide, but it's also a little bit of a card advantage as well. Just a fun card to play with in this reanimation self-mill type strategy. And of course Vraska Relic Seeker, the 6 mana Vraska, lets us make 2/2 pirates, and we can also use it to destroy artifacts, creatures, or enchantments, and then make a treasure token. And then the -10 is kind of a game-ending 1. Target player's life total becomes 1. So it's pretty easy to finish our opponent if their life total is only at 1. And Boneyard Parley, it's a little bit expensive at 7 mana. However, it's a pretty crazy ability. We can exile 5 target creature cards from any graveyards. Your opponent gets to choose which piles to put those in, 2 piles, and then you get to choose which of those piles to keep. So you get to pick the 5 best creatures that are in both graveyards, and then your opponent has to separate those into 2 different piles, so you're guaranteed to get at least 1 or 2 really, really good creatures off of this. And then whatever you don't choose just goes back to their just goes back into the graveyard, so it doesn't go exile or anything like that. You can always target with one of your other reanimation spells. And now we're getting to some of our big boy payoffs here. Demon of Loathing, a 7 mana 7/7 flying trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices a creature. So I mean, this is just kind of overkill. Like if you imagine Bond of Revival on this thing, hasting a 7/7 trample, flying, and then it's going to deal damage because of the trample, guaranteed. And then that player's going to have to sacrifice a creature, And whatever the sacrifice, so potentially something you can get back with one of your reanimation spells. And just being able to do 7 damage in the air. That can also win you the game here in just a couple turns. Also, Lotleth Giant, 6/5 for 7 mana, so pretty expensive. But when it enters, it deals 1 damage to target opponent for each creature card in your graveyard. So we're going to have a ton of creature cards in our graveyard by the time we're ready to either cast this or reanimate this, and then we can hit our opponent for, like 10 damage out of nowhere, and have a 6/5 body on the board as well. And also looking at Motor Hulk, it's 7 black and green for a 6/6. However, it's 1 less to cast for each creature card in our graveyard. With all the self-mill we're doing, we should be able to cast this for 3 or 4 mana easily, and then have a nice 6/6. When it enters, we do get to return a land card from our graveyard to the battlefield. We do have some nice utility lands we can get back with this, including a bit of a kind of an infinite, sort of semi-infinite loop with like a Memorial to Folly, the Black Memorial, where you can sacrifice it to get a creature card from your graveyard back to your hand. So you can kind of loop that infinitely if you want. And we also have Erebos' Intervention for some removal and life gain, as we can target creature gets -X until end of turn, and you gain X life. So since we are a bit of a slower deck, we're trying to get set up with all of our self-mill. We don't mind throwing those creatures in front of our opponent's creatures and letting them die just to protect our life total while we're getting set up for our big plays. But sometimes our opponent's going to kind of push more damage than we would like, and so Erebos Intervention is a way to kill something and gain life at the same time. And then we can kind of stabilize a little bit from there and pull off our big reanimation spells and things like that. So of course we're running Castle Locthwain for a card draw, Memorial to Folly, 6 Swamp, 5 Forests, all the dual lands, and made some room for utility lands since we are running 2 colors. I put in Arch of Vraska, just a fantastic card draw in the late game. Once you have the City's Blessing, you can pay 5 to draw a card. Blast Zone is a nice little bit of removal. Obviously, with our reanimation strategy, we just want to keep our opponent's board clear, and we don't necessarily mind losing our own things as well, because we can bring them back if we need to. Of course, Command Tower. Any multicolored Brawl deck should have Command Tower. Cryptic Caves, just a nice additional source of card draw in the form of a land. We can pay 1 to sacrifice it, draw a card. And of course, you can do that if we have 5 or more lands. And then Fabled Passages for fixing. And then of course, we have Glowspore Shaman and the Motor Hulk and things like that to get any of these back, along with like Golgari Finebroker or Acolyte of Affliction. So if we do need to get additional value out of these, or if we milled one of these and we want them back for some reason, we can always just get those back later on. So just having that kind of flexibility with those cards, being able to get any permanent back, is just super sweet. So there's a couple different ways you could go with this. You can, whatever your big spells are, like Villas, if you want to put that in there. I wouldn't hate you for that. I just thought the Demon that makes your opponent sacrifice stuff fit in perfectly. So that was kind of one of the big payoffs. And of course, Lotleth Giant is pretty fantastic. Thought about even like a Torgar maybe. It's kind of interesting. Thought about Cauldron, but I think with all of our sorceries and things like that, I think that's pretty much all we really need. But you could obviously try that as well. And then some of the green creatures, Palaka Worm to gain life and draw cards is pretty sweet. Thorn Mammoth for like some removal, since we are pretty creature heavy. So there's some different cards you can go with at the top end. But I kind of try to keep it to creatures that also kind of fit the theme from both sides, and not just focus on like the payoff. Obviously, Demon of Loathing makes your opponent sacrifice. Lotleth Giant has Undergrowth. Same thing with Motor Hulk. So they all kind of fit exactly with what our theme is. And so yeah, this is the way I'm choosing to run this particular style of deck. Let me know if you do anything different. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy the FNM Historic Brawl event, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Alright, thanks for watching. Take care.